AskReddit by having for 922. What was something that was done in the name of safety that turned out to be more dangerous than the hazard that it was intended to prevent? Banning kegs of beer on my college campus for tailgates. Everyone started bulk buying cheap vodka instead. A student got a head injury doing a keg stand and they wanted to make things safer. Stupid college kids are better off drinking light beer than they are slugging grape flavored shitty vodka. In general, drug prohibition leads to more dangerous, more concentrated drugs, bathtub gin, crack cocaine replacing powder which replaced Vin Mariani and original Coca-Cola, crystal meth replacing speed pills, and now fentanyl replacing heroin which replaced opium. When the Deepwater Horizon oil rig blew up and dumped crude oil into the Gulf of Mexico, the chemical core exits was used to disperse it. Turns out it was about 10 times worse than the crude oil itself and also caused the oil to just sink to the bottom of the Gulf, where it poisoned the entire food web. Making the oil disappear was then main point, because the optics of the public not seeing the oil slicks on the ocean was more important for BP than actually cleaning up the oil. If the oil is gone then they could declare success because see, no more oil. Food webs be damned, coastal fishing communities be damned, human health be damned, because they have to think of their shareholders. Those BP execs should be in jail for life, but there isn't justice in this world for people with money. Thalidomide. It is a drug that was prescribed, in Germany, I think, to pregnant mothers to help with nausea. It caused terrible deformities in the children, arms or legs that were almost stubs, with flipper-like things instead of hands or feet. That was one use. It was also a sedative, thought to be safe because people tried to commit suicide with it, and couldn't. It actually never made it to the American market at the time, early 1960s, because Dr. Francis Kelsey questioned some information about neuropathies caused by this drug. It's now used under tightly controlled circumstances to treat some types of cancer or autoimmune disorders, and Hansen's disease, FKA leprosy. Safety box cut is where the user has to keep pressure on the button to keep the blade extended, otherwise it automatically retracts back into the handle. People end up straining awkwardly to hold them, and focus more on keeping the blade open rather than what they are trying to cut, so there's more accidents. It doesn't even stop you from cutting yourself. I have used countless box cutters and utility knives in my life. If the blade slips, I just release my grip and get out of the way. But because I have such a death grip trying to hold the blade open so it cuts properly, I jammed that bitch right through my leg when it slipped. I got lucky and it was a surface cut, no stitches, just band-aids. But yeah, I told my last job that I ain't using one unless they want another work comp claim with my name on it. I had jammed a tape gun into my thumb. No, I am not a klutz. I've got a story. So I rented a car and I'm driving with the dash display map showing me where to go since I'm on unfamiliar, fast, 2-lane winding roads and a complicated route. Suddenly the screen blanks out with a massive red message warning with a long small print message underneath. I try to read what it says, nearly driving off the road, but finally get to where I can pull over to read it. In small letters under the giant red warning it reads, "Taking your eyes off the road for too long while using this system could cause a crash resulting in injury or death to you or others." I hate the dash slab, and I hate it more when it flashes something at me. Binding a broken rib, which can cause pneumonia, so they no longer do that. My BF's dad told me to do this because it was how they used to do it and it works fine. I looked it up and sure enough, if you limit your breathing with compression you won't be getting much air circulation in the lower part of your lungs, causing pneumonia. I decided to not use it and I'm doing much better. I didn't break a rib, had an X-ray done. But it sure as hell felt like I broke it for over a week. I barely feel it now though. Glad I didn't give myself pneumonia for no fucking reason. Telling parents not to expose young children to peanuts because it might cause a peanut allergy. This meant young children were not exposed to peanuts at all, and later in life when they did come across peanuts their bodies thought it was a foreign object and became allergic. Yeah, they've done studies on early exposure to bamba, a peanut and corn based snack often served to kids, and it turns out that it drastically reduces the prevalence of later peanut allergies in comparable cohorts. https://en.wikipedia.org/bamba_open bracket snack closed bracket #peanut_allergy. Overvigilance in forest fire protection leads to buildup of burnable materials, and hot or more destructive fires were the result. Aren't forest fires kinda important for the forest overall health and growth too? Getting rid of lockers in schools in favor of super heavy backpacks. My high school in the 1980s had gotten rid of lockers. I'm so jealous of my kids that get to have lockers today. Plus half their materials are on the iPad anyway. It's like the school administrators thought drugs were super heavy and someone couldn't carry them around all day. Password rules. Many reduce the number of possible passwords instead of increasing it. When I worked in it, we had to change passwords once a month. No reusing previous passwords. Passwords had to be significantly different. No changing 123 to 234. So everyone had to write down their password on a post-it sticker paper and stick on the computer monitor for all to see. Not exactly safety related, but there is a thing called the Cobra effect about a change causing the opposite effect. The British went to India, where there are many cobras. The British were kinda freaked out by the cobras and wanted them gone, so they offered a bounty on cobra heads. They assumed that the Indian folk would kill cobras for the bounty, and then there would be fewer cobras. But instead, some folks started breeding cobras in basements, in order to farm the bounty. A few cobras would always escape. Thus, the number of cobras nearby actually increased. So the British figured out that this was because of the cobra bounty, and they cancelled the bounty, assuming this would bring things back to normal. So now the folks threw all the worthless cobras out of their basements, which increased the number of cobras nearby again. Every change the British made in an effort to decrease the number of cobras actually caused more cobras, repeatedly. Now talk about Mao Zedong exterminating swallows in China. Prop 65 in California. When everything has a warning, nothing has a warning. It causes fatigue, and now people ignore even legitimate important information. This comment contains properties known to the state of California to cause cancer. That time a UK swimming pool forced a one child one adult policy, meaning mums with more than one kid couldn't go at the kids' hours during the week when the dads were at work. The intention was to prevent drownings. The pool had never had a drowning. The result was kids didn't learn to swim and drowned at other swimming venues. Trans fats. Needed something that was vegetable-based replacement for saturated fats that are bad for you. When I was a kid, butter was bad for you, margarine was good for you. Now it is more like the opposite. The Four Pests campaign as part of the Great Leap Forward campaign by Chairman Mao Zedong of the CCP. It labeled sparrows as being a pest affecting food production and storage because they were believed to consume substantial quantities of grain. The other pests were rats, flies and mosquitoes, and they were targeted to mitigate the spread of disease. The Great Leap Forward campaign was supposed to quickly advance the country from an agrarian society to an industrialist communist society after the end of the Chinese Civil War. Because of the mass killing of sparrows as well as disruption of their surrounding environment through loud noises which led to them leaving areas of human habitation, led to a massive boom in locust populations, which alongside poor agricultural policies and techniques and poor government management regarding the campaign led to a large famine that is estimated to have caused the death of 15-55 million people. My old company handed out fancy shirts when rolling out a new safety program in the field. The next day, they had to ban people from wearing them because the nylon shirts were prone to melting from the various heat sources we worked around. I had a similarly stupid experience with corporate safety. I was a delivery driver for a large grocery chain in Australia. The company was tired of idiots hitting mailboxes or fences when reversing, so their solution was to put big stickers on the side mirrors telling the drivers to get out and look before reversing. Of course, no one sitting in an office considered that blocking half the mirror with a big label would in any way reduce visibility. I complained and ripped them off my truck immediately. It lasted a couple months, I think, before they were eventually removed. Safety nozzles on jerry cans in the US. Requires a minimum of 3 hands to make work even a little bit, and fuel is still spilling everywhere. Such a waste. Those safety nozzles are ostensibly designed to limit spills, which is a pretty delightful way of describing something that is basically guaranteed to spurt gas all over the fucking place every time they get used. 5-point harnesses in track day cars without a hands device. By preventing the airbags from softening the head in a crash, the head along with the added weight of the helmet makes your neck the weakest link. Lots of auto clubs require a hands type device now that so many people have been injured this way. That's how Dale Earnhardt died. Sadly, but also thanks to him, nobody in NASCAR has died on the track since. There was a law passed to make CEO pay public. It was meant to promote transparency and accountability. CEO pay has since skyrocketed because now they compete with other CEO salaries. Breathalyzers in bars. Meant to show people how intoxicated they were so they would not drive. Instead, people got more drunk because they would try and see who could blow the highest. Like the police signs that show your speed as you drive by. Meant to let you know that you are speeding. Instead gave a public announcement of who could drive the fastest. In my town, the high school kids realized that one was set exactly 1/4 mile down a straight road from a traffic light. Passenger would record video on his phone as proof of who hit the highest number. The war on drugs. The winner, drugs. By a lot. I have spilled more gasoline because of the mandated godforsaken no spill spouts than I ever did with a simple tube. I spill more gas as an adult using the new style cans than I did as a 12-year-old with the normal style. I can't fathom how anybody thinks the new design is better or safer in any way. The only explanation is payoffs. The Patriot Act. The insane amount of privacy invasion and extra powers that were granted to federal and local law enforcement that have never been rescinded far outweighs any good, none, that the Patriot Act was supposed to deliver. This is a good one ostensibly for safety though. People were scared, so it was an opportunity, less for actual safety of the populace. Introducing cane toads to Australia. That's a funny name. I would have called them chaswizzers. Making food healthy by getting rid of the fat and adding tons of sugar to replace it. They didn't want to make it healthy, they wanted to be able to sell it to health conscious consumers without the slightest concern about how fat it made them. Mission accomplished. Fat-free food. It was a huge health craze. Low fat, no fat, get the fat out of food. But fat added taste. Food without it was bland. So the food companies loaded up sugar to restore taste. And sugar is much unhealthier than fat ever was. Fire-resistant clothing, FRC. Worn by construction workers in greenfield projects, resulting in heat exhaustion and heat strokes in areas where flash fires wouldn't occur anyway. Stranger danger. Most children are preyed upon by people they know. Absolutely better for a lost child to quickly ask an adult for help than wander around for hours and get themselves into difficulty because they're scared of all adults. We tell our kids to go into a shop and ask for help or ask a family for help. Airbags killed more kids than it saved when they first came out. That's why most cars now have seat weight sensors that disable the front airbag. If you're below a certain weight. Zero tolerance policies in elementary schools. Just taught kids to interpret rules as black and white as possible into adulthood. does nothing to meet the situation for what it is, which results in a lot of gaslit children. If you break the rules, you deserve whatever happens to you is a recipe for all sorts of abuse, from child beating to prison rape. AskReddit. Turns out good old grass is less prone to cause injuries. Isn't Astro used because it's less maintenance? Surely nobody thought concrete with a plastic carpet was safer than dirt and grass? In-car tech touch screens, and honestly many of the safety features themselves are just so poorly implemented even today that they cause more problems than they are worth. The touchscreen definitely takes more attention than buttons and dials ever did. Asbestos. Some of the first cigarette filters were made using asbestos. https://www.asbestos.com/products/cigarette-filters/ cigarettes, now with more cancer. Antibacterial products in routine use. They are fine for people with compromised immune systems, but their over and misuse has contributed to resistant bacteria. The same thing is true regarding the misuse of antibiotics as a growth enhancer, especially in poultry. When it was discovered that a microscopic dose of tetracycline makes chickens put on weight a bit faster, and can be sent to the butcher a couple days earlier, people went nuts. I don't have a problem with the use of antibiotics in livestock if they are sick and need it, but this use is not one of them. Red light cameras. They actually increased accidents because drivers would panic and stop short of the light. Yep. Especially because cities and contractors were allowed to manipulate yellow light timing, resulting in crashes. E-tickets partner. Extremely bright headlights on cars these days. I can't tell you how many times I've almost run off the road because an oncoming car has those obnoxiously bright blue headlights. I keep hoping lawmakers will pass regulations for them. WW2 survivorship bias and armoring planes. They looked at all the planes that came back and saw where they were shot up. They started to armor those parts of the planes, but didn't see any effect on the amount of surviving planes. Until someone realized that the planes were surviving. They needed to armor the areas that weren't shot, because that's where fatal shots happen. The planes that were shot in those areas didn't return. This is partly true, but also encompasses a degree of urban legend. Abraham Wald led mathematical research during the war, which came to be known as survivorship bias. My recollection is that it wasn't put into practice until after the war, though. Thalidomide. Pause to thank Francis Kelsey, https://en.wikipedia.org/francis_oldham_kelsey the FDA reviewer who refused to approve thalidomide for use in America. Prohibition. Abstinence-only education. Turns out teens have more unprotected sex when you teach them as little about sex as possible, and kids who don't know anything about sex and boundaries are more vulnerable to child predators. Let's not even get into the harm done to queer kids when they only think they hear about being queer as it's bad and you better not be. Fun fact, Japanese high schools are now modeling their sex education programs after American ones, specifically because of the high rates of teenage pregnancy they cause. Super fucked up. When they said that fat is bad for you, so you should have hydrogenated oil instead. Also, when they said that we need to save all of the trees by using plastic instead. The Chernobyl safety test could have gone better. DARE. The Patriot Act, Executive Order SAR equals X and AMP, VED equals 2RUKUE85U at 5 DAX UXL0QIHCSTDJ4QMX MOHOPE 4 CAG, Japanese internment, pretty much any act that turned American citizens into the enemy without any evidence to back it up. Margarine trans fats. Margarine was introduced by the French in 1869 by Napoleon III. Butter was in short supply, so an alternative was developed, oleomargarine. It was meant as a substitute for butter for the military and lower classes. So, it wasn't about health or safety, it was about economy. Its entire history is more about finding a cheaper, faster, easier way to make something that resembles butter. The health benefits vs butter was nothing more than marketing. Doubtful it is for safety, but roadside speed cameras fining people a few kilometers over the speed limit in Australia. People spend more time watching a speedo to keep 2 kilometers within range and do not spend enough time watching outside. 2 kph is such a small range, WTF. In California, they made a law that you could only sell handguns that would not fire if the magazine was removed from the gun. This was in response to people ejecting the magazine and forgetting that a round was still in the chamber, and then accidentally, or negligently, firing the round in the chamber. So seems like a good solution. Make a law that dictates that you can't buy guns unless they are safe when the magazine is out, called a magazine disconnect. So gun manufacturers started to add this feature. But now here's the problem. People now think that guns can't fire when the magazine is not in the gun. But that is not true for the majority of guns. So since the safety feature only exists in half the guns in existence, well, more like 10% really, then people thought that that's how they just work, and so more people were accidentally shooting guns because they thought that since the gun they were familiar was safe with the magazine out, then all guns were. A much better solution was to simply educate people and say the gun can fire even with the magazine out, and then not try a mechanical clutch that only exists on a handful of models. Stranger danger. The overwhelming majority of abuse and or kidnappings come from people you already know, if not in your family. People are less likely to seek out a stranger for help in emergencies if they are taught to distrust every stranger. The new style gas cans. I've never spilt so much gas before. In 1966, a crew installed a diverter to increase coolant flow in the cooling system of the Enrico Fermi fast breeder reactor outside Detroit. Instead of helping, it broke loose and blocked coolant flow, causing a near meltdown. The title of the book about the incident was a quote from an engineer: "We almost lost Detroit." I just went down the rabbit hole on the Fermi reactor. Interesting story. That book was basically alarmist propaganda. They came nowhere near losing Detroit. The reactor used between 91 and 111 fuel rod assemblies, and after the incident they found 4 that had melted. Putting babies on their stomach to reduce incidence of cold and flu. That led to a material uptick in SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, in many Western countries who adopted this practice. Most Asian countries rightly ignored this advice. Babies will instinctively turn their head if they can't breathe, however when very young they can't turn over, so if there's fluffy blankets or they manage to scoot into a corner with a bumper they can't get a clear breathing path and suffocate, which is the leading theory of the majority of SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, cases. Babies need to be on a solid surface with minimal excess materials for best results. Once they can roll over you can ease up on the concerns a little. Then it's getting time to figure out how to control their suicide attempts during the toddler years.